Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com. Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull. Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull on ubnradio.com.
Hi, it's Kathryn Tull, your host for Compassionate Conversation. Thanks again for joining me for another episode, because today we are going to have a wonderful and very heartfelt conversation with one of my favorite gurus on love, Kathryn Alice, and I will be introducing her to you in just a moment. It's been a really interesting week for me in my life. All of us are human beings, and we go through things all the time. And just because we may look great on the outside doesn't necessarily mean that everything feels great on the inside. That's exactly why it's so important to me to talk about compassion with you, because we all need to have compassion for ourselves. And there is no time better than right now to start learning to be more compassionate with yourself and with the lives of everyone that you touch on a regular basis. The world is going through shifting. We hear about violence every day on the news and in the media. We see that the weather is changing. We see things flying around in our own lives that may not be exactly the way we would design them. And through all of that, we need to hold on. We need to hold on to ourselves and to each other. And so I invite you to do that. Hold on to yourself and to everyone in your life with a great deal of compassion. We all need it now more than ever. So thank you for tuning into Compassionate Conversation. I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist. I'm thrilled and delighted to be here with you today. And callers, please remember to join the conversation. You can call straight into studio here, 323-284-7826. And with no further ado, I'm going to introduce my beautiful guest, Kathryn Alice. Kathryn is the author of the best-selling book, Love Will Find You, and she is one of the most foremost, that was a silly thing to say, one of the most foremost. Kathryn, you are one of the foremost experts on soulmates and spiritual dating. Kathryn has helped tens of thousands of people find love. Her work has been featured in Psychology Today, Cosmopolitan, The New York Times, Body and Soul, and on big television shows like Montel, NBC, and The Aware Show. Kathryn is a licensed spiritual practitioner at the Agape International Spiritual Center. And as you know, my audience, I talk about Agape quite a bit. That is actually not how Kathryn and I know each other. Kathryn, I was introduced to your work. I started to tell you this very briefly before we came into the studio. I was introduced to your work many years ago when I was exiting my second marriage, which was a very difficult, painful exit. I've talked about it some on the show before.
Right.
And I needed help to release that person from my life. So I bought your program, Releasing a person.
Releasing a person. Right.
And it really did help me. And I kind of fell in love with your work back then. So it is such a thrill to have you in studio with me today. You're one of my heroes.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I am honored to be here, and I'm glad that I helped.
Me too.
Yeah, bless your heart. Divorce can be hard.
It was grueling. This happened to be my second divorce. It was highly contentious. It was a situation of bullying in the courtroom. It was just miserable. And this was a person I had been with for almost 20 years and we have two children together, and he had been my oldest son's stepson for almost 17 years, stepfather for almost 17 years. So there was a deep attachment, and the severing was, really painful. Yeah. So your program helped me tremendously. So thank you.
I'm so glad. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So again, it's a thrill to have you here in studio with me today. And I know that you have helped thousands of people. And my theme this month has been intimate, loving relationships all month long. And I am talking about intimate love from various perspectives. And you have a very broad psychological and spiritual perspective on love.
Right.
That is there a way that you could kind of summarize in a few sentences what your perspective on love is?
Well, I am a little bit of a, I guess, rose-colored glasses, some people might say. I'm Southern, and so my Southernisms creep into my work. But one of my sayings is there's a lid for every pot. And that means that there's somebody for everybody. And I do come in with that kind of unlimited perspective. And I also teach that love is not limited by age, by weight, by some of the things that people tell themselves why they might not get love.
Yes.
I've never seen that limit. Love doesn't know limits. So I work with that a lot to open people up to love. It works pretty well, especially people who have lost hope. And then also what we talked about, I help people to release attachment when they're going through a breakup or divorce.
Right.
So those are two topics I tend to focus on. Also dating. Dating can be challenging in and of itself.
Absolutely.
For people. So I help with that.
And, a lot of my clients are here in Los Angeles. I'm a psychotherapist in private practice here in LA. And a lot of people tell me that Los Angeles in particular is a very difficult place to date. And I've been single now for 13 years, so I've got my own chest of war stories about dating.
Bless your heart.
But we're not going to talk about that today.
Okay.
But you had sent me some questions that you like to be able to speak to, and I loved your questions. So what I would love for us to start talking about today, and callers, please remember you can call in 323-284-7826. You can ask Kathryn Alice a question. You can ask me a question. We will both do our very best to compassionately and from our hearts answer any questions you have. 323-284-7826. Join in the conversation. So, Kathryn, let's start with this question. Why does it take some people so long to find love?
Well, I think that most of us are not meant to find love when people think you should. Most people think you should meet them in high school or college and get together early. It doesn't work that way. Some of us walk a ways alone, and we needed to, and then we come together. I've had people up into their 80s find love. And so love doesn't really know a season like that. So there's timing, but there's also a lot of blocks people get. And they delay themselves by thinking badly, maybe by settling and being with the wrong person for a long time, like that. And so there are many reasons, but I like to think that there's ways to expedite it, and I help people to make it snappy.
So you think that the biggest reason why it takes some people so long to find love is perhaps that they have been telling themselves some stories about themselves that prevent love from being able to reach them?
And even about love. Cynicism in love doesn't work. I remember how you just said dating in LA is tough?
Yeah.
Well, I have taught in like over 50 cities, and everybody says that in every city.
Okay, so we don't have a corner on that market here in LA.
We don't. Well, I don't believe it. And you have to say, instead of dating sucks in this town, you have to say, well, dating may suck in this town, but not for me.
Ah, okay.
Because I open the paper and I see engagement stories. Maybe I'll be next, or marriage stories. Right. And so I have people change that and not, be so kind of, I don't know, a little bit limited or think it's going to be hard.
Whenever I hear that, I always believe it to be an expression of frustration because it's being said by somebody who really wants love in their life, and it's taking them longer than they would wish for it to come in. And certainly when you meet a series of people who look like really wonderful candidates to you and it doesn't work out, it is very easy to get frustrated. So, but I like it.
It's true. And I have to turn that around and say none of it's wasted. When you come together with the right one, you can see your whole history, why it had to happen, and that it was all valuable. It all led you to how happy you can be now. Even if when you finally meet the one, it's they look so good compared to some of the people you've been with.
The other thing that I say to my clients about that is that, first of all, you could never be who you are today without having taken every single step
exactly
along the way.
Yes.
So if it hasn't been the right one yet, that means that you've been becoming more and more of who you are here to be, so that you will be able to deliver and receive so much more when it is the right relationship. Right. And the other thing that I like to say about that is that, and I got this from Abraham Hicks, actually, and I love this, that we learn by the contrast. So every time it doesn't work out, we're really fast at identifying, well, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't like that, and I don't like that. So every time we get to discover what we don't want and what we don't like, we're getting that much more information about what we do want and what we do like.
Exactly. And it's very valuable because you wouldn't have wanted it, and you really wouldn't have wanted them, but now you know.
That's
and you
right.
might not have known. You're honing your preferences, as Abraham says.
Exactly.
And I know that personally. I've been married for a long time, and I still can't get over it, that he's so just right for me. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. And that's what ends up happening. You know, if you stick in there and can go through the bumps and not take them too, not let them slow you down.
Absolutely.
So it's not always easy, for sure.
Kathryn, we're going to take a very quick break. Okay. I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist, your host for Compassionate Conversation, in studio today with one of the world's foremost experts on love, Kathryn Alice. Come right back. We're going to keep talking about how to bring the love you want into your life. Hi, this is Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist. Life can be complex, and your thoughts about it matter. If you've ever felt stuck and wanted answers, I'm available to help. Through my private practice in Los Angeles, by Skype and by phone, and through my book, The Next Bold Step, help is available. The Next Bold Step, learning to love and value yourself and know that you matter, is your roadmap to deeper self-understanding and moving ahead. Contact me at KathrynTull.com. Better tomorrows are waiting.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull. Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull on ubnradio.com.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist, back with you for more Compassionate Conversation. Today is November 20th, I think. Oh, my goodness. Thanksgiving is next week. I cannot believe that the year has just zipped by. I'm in studio today with one of the world's foremost experts on love, Kathryn Alice. We are talking about why it takes some people so long to find love. And another way of asking that same question, Kathryn, is what are some of the major blocks that people have to love?
Well, the two biggies are being attached to somebody else. Unless many people will kind of say, my ex was the best I'll ever do, and I blew it with them, or maybe they're going through an imminent divorce, but they might be attached to somebody else, and that is such a strong, we're hardwired for it. It's such a strong bond that it really can hold up love.
Yes.
And so I don't consider anybody available until they can kick an attachment and dissolve it and be fully available. So that's number one.
Right.
And the other biggie is self-esteem. Feeling that somehow a lot of people are out of my league, and I don't believe in leagues. You know, I think that we're all equal, and there's a right fit and then the wrong fit.
Right.
And so knowing that one is worthy of love is very important. And if people don't know it, it's a big block. So those are two biggies. And then there's some other ones too.
What would be some of the other ones?
The other ones we talked about, which are having cynicism about love, or having a belief that it's hard to date, or love is pie in the sky, I'll never get it. It's a 1 in a million chance.
Right.
So bad beliefs, patterns, or a delay. And that could be like always going for people unavailable.
Right.
Going for the drama rather than real love. which are very different. Getting into the competition idea of getting the girl or getting the most flowers on Valentine's Day. Competition has nothing to do with love.
Right.
So people might be working at the wrong level.
Yes.
So those are some of the big ones.
And of course, as a therapist, the minute you start saying all of those things, I'm immediately in my head unpacking all the layers. I have I have extensively studied the effects of trauma, and so I have a certain perspective on some of the reasons why belief systems develop, some of the reasons why people are attracted to drama, and why it is so hard for them to break that cycle in their life. And so why do you think people become so cynical?
It's a protection. As you said, if you've been traumatized, all of a sudden you just want to avoid the hurt again. It's not the best perspective, but it serves.
Right.
And so I think your being thinks it's protecting you, but it's keeping love out.
Right.
And so it's in vogue. You look at any television show these days, people are cynical, and it's funny. It's kind of cool. You go to certain cities, like sophisticated, like New York comes to mind. Everybody's a little cynical and tongue-in-cheek,
right? Because
that's the sensibility. It doesn't work in love, though.
You know, it's so interesting that you say that, because I was raised in a home where my father was from the East Coast and was very sarcastic, and there was a lot of sarcastic humor in our family as a whole. So I was raised with a great deal of sarcasm. As I have grown and evolved, I have come to really dislike sarcasm. And I find that cynical people use a lot of sarcasm, and I think it is a protective mechanism.
It is.
And it is typically, to me, veiled anger.
Yes.
So when somebody is saying something unkind about you and then they go, "Oh, just kidding, I was just being sarcastic," I don't like that. That doesn't fly with me very well.
It can be hurtful. I think it's always good to not take it personally, because they're just showing you their own pain.
Yes.
They're reacting out of that. It's really not anything about you or me or anybody they might direct it to. But yes, trauma is a big one. One of my clients, when I used to see people privately, was a Holocaust victim. She was older, and she had had a series of relationships since then where she was always the victim, playing out her childhood.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it was a big deal to get her beyond that trauma and understand that she was deserving of everything she wanted.
Yes.
And happily, she has a happy ending, because she did meet a guy who honored her.
Oh, wonderful.
And he was perfect for her and helped her heal. When you get to the right person, they help you heal if you still have trauma.
Yes.
And so it doesn't end when you're with them, but they are a safe space to work out some of these issues. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
So it's good.
In fact, I was mentioning to you before the top of the show that I'm being specifically trained in a form of couples therapy that is intentional to bring out that healing between people. So with the concept being that the damage occurred in a relationship of some kind. And so the healthiest place and the most profound healing can occur and does occur in another relationship.
Right.
Because that's where the original wounding took place.
It can come up in that relationship.
So people who are cynical about love are basically people who have been hurt, who are trying to protect themselves, and they do that with an attitude of, whether it's sarcasm or just cynicism, or even just continuing to affirm for themselves with the negative, like, "Oh, well, dating in LA sucks," or, "I'm 10 pounds or 20 pounds or 40 pounds overweight, so, nobody's ever going to fall in love with me." It's
protective. It definitely is. And the underlying philosophy is that if I don't expect much, I won't get disappointed.
That's right.
Which is a bad way to go through life.
I agree, because what you expect is what you're going to get.
Exactly. What you believe acts as true. And so you create your reality and your future by that. And so it's hard, because people are very married to their cynicism or sarcasm, but it's one of the things I ask people to drop.
Yes,
they could be that way, but when you're dating and working on love, you got to drop it and have your heart open, which I love the name of your show. Because you have to have compassion.
Yes.
That's all about having an open heart.
And a lot of people don't know how to have compassion for themselves.
Yes.
Because their hearts have been hurt, so they've closed off a lot.
Yes.
So they don't have a lot of compassion for themselves, and they can't feel it for other people either because they're just so busy protecting themselves.
Exactly.
And so it would make sense that that really is one of the biggest reasons why people can't find love, and that it is one of the major blocks to actually having love. Love could be right staring you in the face in your life, but because of your own pain and wounding and history, maybe you can't let it in. Maybe you don't even recognize that it's there.
And that is the biggest shift that I see, Kathryn, when people do my work. Like they come to a live workshop and all of a sudden they get hope again, and they haven't had it. It's been protected with all these layers.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they're smiling and less cynical, and they meet someone very quickly.
Oh,
it can
wonderful.
happen like that. So it's kind of cool.
Oh, how wonderful.
I love seeing that happen.
So another one of the blocks that you mentioned was being attached to someone else. Now that is a big conversation.
Oh, yes. It certainly is, as you know very well.
Yes. So let's talk about that a little bit. How can you tell? How could I tell if I'm not attached to somebody anymore?
I have a measure. Can I just put the underpinning so people understand how serious it is?
Yes, please do.
And you know this, but as a child, if you did not get attached to a primary caregiver, either your mom or dad often, then you would die.
Right.
You know, it's attachment we're hardwired for, and it serves us. In romance, I always think that maybe people subconsciously think they're going to die if they let go. And so when somebody cavalierly says, oh, just get over it, you know, go next, they're discounting how hard it is to let go of that attachment.
Yes, yes. I couldn't agree with you more.
It's very intense, and there are ways to do it, which I worked with and found some very good methodology, but it's rough.
I want to go back to your original explanation and elaborate on that just a little bit.
Okay, yes.
I teach this to my clients all the time about attachment because there is this social thing, and I think that it's really been promoted in the media and truthfully all the women's magazines that, you know, it's like, oh, he didn't work out, next. So
right.
it really is almost cruel to have that expectation that when you have fallen in love with someone, when you have allowed yourself to be vulnerable and have opened your heart, it's cruel to expect of yourself that you've realized finally that it doesn't work. It's been hard for you to come to that realization.
Yes.
And that all of a sudden that person isn't going to matter to you, or that relationship isn't going to matter. It's unrealistic because going back to your original explanation of attachment, which I fully concur with.
Right.
And I just want to say this in different words. An infant cannot survive without being taken care of by adults, by big people.
Yes.
They might even be older siblings. So in our parents' lives, they were struggling with their own issues. A lot of brand new parents are overwhelmed. They're exhausted. There may not be enough money. There may not be any family support. They don't know how to cope with parenthood. Mothers sometimes struggle with postpartum depression and don't know why they're so sad, exhausted, disinterested in their baby. All that a baby feels is love, comfort, warmth, being held, being full, being dry. That's how a baby survives. And if those needs are not met, and if the baby doesn't get smiling and cooing and sweet talking and really being held and cuddled, the baby won't thrive. And so the foundation of attachment really starts in infancy, and it's the quality of those attachments that do begin to build a pattern that we see people live out for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and people get attachment issues. That's the people who show up to my Releasing a Person workshop or get my releasing work, or people who did have that situation as a baby where they started getting attachment issues. The worst person, the most attached that I ever worked with was a boy whose mom committed suicide when he was 5. And his whole early childhood was fraught. It was not comforting. It was not a thriving environment. And so he could never let go of anybody. And
Yes,
so the
I'm
more
sure.
wounded you are, the harder you will fall, the less detached you can get, but you can heal, which is what your
Absolutely.
work is all about, and mine too. So
Wonderful.
yes.
This is Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist. Kathryn, we're going to take another very quick break. Please remember you can call in after the break, 323-284-7826. In studio today with Kathryn Alice, Love Guru. I'm Kathryn Tull, psychotherapist, your host. Come right back for more compassionate conversation.
Shows that make you laugh. Shows that make you think. Music that moves you. It could only be one place. Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's compassionate conversation with Kathryn Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate conversation with Kathryn Tull on ubnradio.com.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist, your host for Compassionate Conversation. In studio today with Love Guru Kathryn Alice, we are having a fabulous conversation about how we can let love into our lives. And right before the break, we were talking about how do we know if we are no longer attached to someone else. And you said, Kathryn, that you have a measure that shows very clearly whether or not, because we were talking about what are some of the blocks, and you were very clear that one of the biggest blocks is when someone is still attached to someone else. So I want to know, how do I know when I am no longer attached to someone?
Well, there are measures. And so when you first break up, you're thinking about a person many times a day. If that's compounded with rejection, which is not even real, that makes it worse. For example, kind of what you went through with a divorce that's rough. It compounds it with all these other things like custody issues or division of property.
Right.
And so it's looming in your life at that moment. And gradually you detach and you know you're getting somewhere when you're thinking about it less and you're able to focus on other things in your life.
Yes.
Eventually you might get triggered once a week. You see their sister, or you see a mutual friend and they ask and you're triggered again. So you're getting there. And the absolute measure that I have is, let's say that you're in a room with them and before you had a radar. When you're attached, you have a radar and you're seeing everything through the filter of where they are. And so you always know where they are in the room.
Right.
They're in a room with you. You don't know where they are. You're pretty indifferent. Usually you're thinking, what was I thinking when the attachment's done? Because it's almost like an addiction when you're attached.
Right.
But you can see them with another date or making out with somebody and it doesn't bother you anymore.
Oh, that's a big measure.
It's a good measure. There are degrees, like I said, just to
Right.
temper it. You may be mostly released, but get triggered every now and then.
Right.
But when you're that indifferent, and hopefully you wish them well, then you're good. You're released.
It's interesting. It brings to mind a question that is kind of more deeply psychological, but I can't help but wonder, because I've studied triggers so much. I can't help but wonder if when you have had a really strong attachment to somebody and you have grown more and more detached over time, and you might be in the same room with them at a party, but if something does trigger you, if that doesn't just at lightning speed take you back to some sort of a loss from early life where a detachment was forced upon you that you didn't want. So I guess I just want, I think that those are really important measures that you've pointed out, but I guess I also think of the underlayers of what can be going on.
Well, and it's true, because it does. Usually the trigger is taking you to other losses. And when you have a loss, it ignites it, it re-triggers
Exactly.
it. But I do think, and I know in your work you do this, that you can heal completely, not only of the current situation, but anything that's making it worse, that compounding it from your past.
Yes, of course. That's where we have to do the work.
Yes, that's the work. And so I might, it might sound a little shallow or poppy the way I'm saying it, but definitely there are many layers. And this is such a huge issue that I work with.
Absolutely.
So,
and I guess
yeah.
because I'm always thinking about compassion and trying to come from a compassionate place in my own heart, so when I'm trying to apply that rule in my own head, like, could I really be in the room with this person and have absolutely no charge from that whatsoever? But I think it's really important to be compassionate with ourselves and remember that if there is a charge, it might not actually be about that person. It might be about the quality of having to sever attachment.
Yes.
And that could be coming from somewhere deeper, not necessarily about that person.
Exactly. And that's why when you're detaching from a particular person, it's good. And one of the things that I teach you may know is to get more help.
Yes.
Because whatever in the past is making it worse. And it is worse if you have wounds or traumas. You get the help, you get rid of that, and you'll never get attached again to the wrong person. Or if you do, you'll release it much more easily.
Right.
So, yes.
And then, of course, that jumps back to, being on your path of figuring out what you want. And you figure out what you want by getting what you don't want. So it's all
it's all good.
It's all very intertwined, and it's always all a learning experience. Please remember, you can call in 323-284-7826. We'd love to take your questions and help you out with any specific situation that you are dealing with right now. So also, we were talking about this feeling of not being worthy of love. Where do you think that comes from?
Bad parenting. When we were growing up, I mean, it's getting better with my children. I try very much to keep them intact. And it's wild to watch somebody who's never had self-esteem issues. Because we're born with that. When we're little, we know we are it.
Right.
And if the neighbor doesn't want to play, we'll go down the block and not, put our head in our hands and think there's something wrong.
Right.
Right. And so it comes from being questioned usually as a child. It's compounded by social experiences, school. Studies have shown that kids, by the time they're 18 and have been through school, they went from 90% self-esteem to like 10% for the most part. And so it's built into our culture, and it's too bad because particularly in love, it limits us.
Yes, absolutely. And, you just made such a great point that it's not only what happens with the parents, but a lot of it occurs in the school setting or in an extracurricular activity. You mentioned competition earlier in the show.
Right.
So whether you are in sports or in drama or in music or in debate club, once you get to the age where you are engaging in some level of competition with other kids, kids can be very cruel, and kids get taught to be very cruel. Like all you have to do is go to a soccer match and listen to the way some of the parents are behaving on the sidelines. So kids get taught to be highly competitive and very cruel to people they're competing with. And I think that does a lot of damage to children's self-esteem.
It does. And luckily it can all be healed. And I love that bullying is becoming uncool.
Yes.
We're finally bringing bullying to the forefront because it's very damaging.
It is.
So.
I meant, John, I haven't really said good morning to you live on air.
No problem.
Good morning,
Good
John.
morning.
John Williams, my wonderful engineer and buddy here in the studio. I saw you pull the mic close. I was wondering if you had something you wanted to say.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Do you believe in you can't love anybody else if you don't love yourself?
A little.
Okay.
Because love knows no bounds. There are some people who haven't loved themselves and have the love of their life who teaches them how to love themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to have body issues when you've got somebody kissing you all over your body, right? It's very healing. And so it doesn't have to go, but it really does help. Because it's hard to even accept love if someone is not loving themselves or not seeing value.
Okay.
So
that's such a great question. And what is so interesting about that question is that very few of us, at least in my generation, and I don't know how the two of you feel about this, but in my generation, nobody ever said, darling, love yourself.
yes.
I was not raised in a generation where encouragement was really taught in parenting. It was
Right.
much more about discipline and structure and order and obedience and compliance and follow the rules and listen to authorities and never talk back, and children are seen but not heard. Well, nothing about any of that is encouraging.
Right.
In fact, it is the most assured way of feeling like you don't matter, that your voice doesn't count, that you're not entitled to an opinion, that you really are supposed to be invisible in a room. That is what you are supposed to be.
That's rough.
So children for so many countless generations were taught that being invisible is the quality you want to go for, that not having a voice, not having an opinion, never rocking the boat, not and never thinking about what you need. That life is always about, well, what are the neighbors going to think? You have to behave to make Mrs. Jones happy. I don't care if you like it or not. So as far as being human beings in the world, millions of us were never actually taught to think about our own feelings,
Right.
or think about our own value, or even think about, do I love myself? Do I like myself? It's all about what other people think about me.
Exactly. That's true.
Which has a lot to do with the show and compassion and the need for it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because compassion was not really a quality that was emphasized unless it was for somebody else. Like somebody else is suffering, let's feel badly for them, or let's reach out to help them. That compassion was taught in those ways, but it wasn't really about, gee, darling, I see that you're sad right now. What do you need? What's going on? I don't remember anybody ever talking to me that way when I was growing up.
Yeah, I'm so glad it's getting better because I see my little boys, like I'll say, honey, do you know how lovable you are? And they'll go, and not in an egotistical way,
Right.
but they just know that they're fine.
That's right.
You know, and it's nice to bring people back to that.
And I see children who are being raised with that kind of an attitude, and the difference. I mean, John and I have talked about this sometimes about, the effects of our childhoods and the effects
Oh,
of
yeah.
the kind of parenting. And it's not that anybody's parents were bad people. Parents only can do what they know how to do based on the
know.
information that they have had.
Exactly. We can't blame them because they were doing the best they could with the knowledge that was available then.
In fact,
So-
you may have had this experience. I've had a lot of people come to work with me in therapy, and I start asking them about their childhoods and things, and they say, wait a minute, stop. I am not interested in blaming my parents. I don't want, my mom and dad were great. They did
Aw.
everything they could.
That is so aware.
Well, but it's usually not actually aware.
Uh-huh.
It's actually in denial.
Oh, okay.
They're not coming from a place of having actually explored how they feel
And gotten beyond it.
Right.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
coming from a place of needing so much to believe
That their parents,
that,
okay.
that their parents were good people. They're so scared to assign blame, and they're so scared to actually have the thought that, oh my gosh, maybe something that my parents did hurt me. And I have had profound results with people, helping them work through the fact that we're not assigning blame. We just need to be able to find root cause so that we
Yes.
can dig out the weed. It's like gardening. You can go pull a weed out by the top, and it's just going to keep coming back over and over and over again.
Right.
It isn't until you really get in there and dig down at the roots and then pull the whole root ball out that you have extricated that weed from the garden. And I find that personal growth is very much that way. If we keep trying to gloss over on the surface and just fix the surface, the underneath hasn't been healed.
Right. You can't, we call that a spiritual bypass, in my community, where you just try to make nice and you don't understand what's going on underneath and,
Right.
and get into it. And it
Right.
has to heal. You have to bring it up to the light, heal it, and then you're good to go. So that gets back to what you were
Right.
talking about, John, just getting to that point where you can love yourself and get beyond all of whatever trauma has been there, whatever healing needs to be
Do you
done.
see those relationships when people don't love themselves becoming codependent?
Totally. Well, if you're a people pleaser, you're probably a giver. Most people will attract a taker, and of course, that's not a soulmate love, and it's off. It's
Right.
codependent, and it cannot sustain itself because it is so off balance. One person is being completely ignored, out of choice. They chose that,
Right.
but they were taught, like you said, to be a giver
Absolutely.
and not give to themselves. And there's just nothing to give, really, if you don't give to yourself and make sure you're good. So
I think so much of that has been the education of mankind over thousands of generations, really, that we were taught always to take care of others and not think about what our own needs are. John, I'm noticing the time. We need to take one more very quick break. Okay. I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist, having a fantastic conversation in studio with Kathryn Alice, Love Guru, and my buddy and engineer, John Williams. We're going to come right back. Remember to call in 323-284-7826. We would love to take your questions, help you out with any specific situation that you're in. We are going to come right back and talk some more about what are some ways that people can bring love into their lives. So be right back with us.
Shows that make you laugh. Shows that make you think. Music that moves you. It could only be one place. Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull on ubnradio.com.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Tull, licensed psychotherapist. Welcome back for our last little bit of Compassionate Conversation this morning with my lovely guest, Kathryn Alice, Love Guru. We've been talking about so many of the aspects of what gets in the way of love. And now we're going to talk about what does good love look like?
Exactly. Well, because you want to raise the bar.
Yes.
No matter what the past has been. When you're with the right person, the love of your life, it's very different. I always tell people, get used to it because it's so different. It doesn't matter how bad it's been in the past.
Yes.
It's so different that the biggest thing people tell me is I have to pinch myself because is this real? Is it going to last? Can it be this good?
Right.
And I say, yes, it can.
So how do you know if you're in a love that is real?
If it feels good, if it's supportive, it's equal. You know, we were talking about a giver and a taker. That's not a soulmate relationship. It's more equal. And at one time, one person might be more needy than the other,
right.
Or one person might kind of dominate a certain part. But in general, it is more equal, more egalitarian, more of a Renaissance relationship, even where perhaps gender roles are thrown away.
Yes.
And so that's a mark. They're definitely crackling chemistry. I always put in there because that's most of us do want to be monogamous. And that being the case, you want it to be really good. And so the chemistry keeps going. I always say the 7th honeymoon is better than the 1st. And they're completely available.
Yes.
There's a lot of literature written about trying to make the wrong relationship work.
Yes.
But it's really refreshing to be with the right person. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder what their intentions. And then they're asking you, what are your intentions?
Right.
Because they want to go forward. It's not work in the same way that being with the wrong person is.
So when it's easy and it flows and it's fluid in both directions, it's not one person's a giver, one person's a taker, because I think that's pretty traditional too. And from what I'm hearing from my clients, there are still a lot of people out there who expect it to be that way, who expect that one person gets to be the receiver and the other person has to be the giver all the time.
Well, it's a big shock when you're with the right person and you email them, well, I've got a little cold, and your cell phone's ringing 30 seconds later, can I bring soup?
Right.
And you've been the giver. It's like, they want to nurture me? So it's great, and it can be that. Some self-help people teach that your soulmate will be the person who brings up all your stuff.
Right.
I'm not one of them. The last chapter in my book, Love Will Find You, begins with relationships are not difficult, and they don't have to be when you're with the right person. Because I do believe that most people, their summaries are based on being in the wrong relationship. It's not perfect, but it's so much easier and flowing and companionable and peaceful and harmonious.
I can't help but wonder, though, Kathryn, if someone who is still healing, in the process of healing from a lot of trauma, if someone who still has a very activated defense system because they've been hurt in the past, whether it's been in an adult intimate relationship or a childhood relationship, if someone is still actively working through a lot of hurt to where they have very active defenses, are they ready to find that soulmate?
Well, the good news is because love knows no limits, there is no being ready. It could happen anytime, and it does. It comes in an instant, and your whole life is changed. I get emails every week with people where that's the experience. However, there may be some bumpy roads. As you see, they're not going anywhere. And as you heal, stuff comes up, but they're in it. It's not, I have this expression, it's not eggshelly.
Right.
You know, it doesn't go away. You don't have to walk on eggshells. It's solid, it's real, it's not going anywhere. And so there is this space to heal.
Right.
And so because love doesn't know limits like that, sometimes somebody in a lot of pain and not healed will meet them. And they don't feel ready. And so then it becomes about accepting your good. And understanding it's not going anywhere. You get this. You don't have to be a nervous wreck. I had somebody end up in the emergency room. She was having a panic attack because she thought this guy who seemed too good to be true was going somewhere. And he was plotting a proposal. They're now married, but she literally thought she was having a heart attack.
Oh, my goodness.
So you get it. And you know, in a way, you're always ready.
Okay.
Okay. You're going to have to take my word for it because I know it goes against a lot of things, but love doesn't know limits like that. Thank God, you know.
I do agree. I mean, just by virtue of being a human being, you are always ready.
Yes.
To give love and receive love. I think that our thought process can get so in the way of that while at our essence we are always ready, our intellectual self may get in the way of that.
Exactly.
Wondering how long it will last.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that's common, but you get this. It's not going anywhere. And so I always have to reassure people when it happens.
So we are down to the last 5 minutes of the show. Before I want to get back to one of our questions, but I want to make sure that everybody hears, how can they find out more about you and your work and access working with you?
Well, my website is probably the best place, and that's KathrynAlice.com.
Okay.
Spelled like your name. It's probably on the screen, but and Alice like Alice in Wonderland. So KathrynAlice.com. That's a great way or you can look me up on Amazon. I've got a lot of books on there.
Right.
So.
Yes, you do. Yes. Wonderful. And I can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, thank you.
And also, I just want to give you my phone number if you'd like to call in. My personal work number is 310-920-9480. You're welcome to call me, and I'll be happy to chat with you, and we'll see if you're interested in finding out more about my work too. So, Kathryn, just to wrap up the show, let's make sure that we end on a super positive note. What are some ways that people can bring love into their lives?
I do something called a soul call. And that's like you close your eyes. It's just energetic, and you invite them in, and you tell the universe, I'm ready. I'm ready for love right now. And it's weird because that actually has an effect. Like you're kind of opening your heart.
Yes.
And certainly practicing love every chance you get. Love your dog. Love your kids. Love kids that you see. Love your friends. Love is kind of a practice. When you have an open heart, love can get in there easily.
Yes.
So then the romance happens.
And I love that you pointed that out. One of the things that I started doing in my own life when I recognized many years ago how deeply, deeply hurt I was, and it was painful trying to recover from that. And one of the things I started doing, because I noticed one day I was out doing an errand somewhere, and some man that I didn't know came up to me and said, "You have such a beautiful smile."
Oh.
And I almost fell over backwards because I was not accustomed to hearing compliments, certainly not accustomed to getting them from strangers. I was, had just come out of the darkest period of my personal life ever and wasn't looking for compliments or expecting them. And so for this nice-looking person to walk up to me and say, "You have such a beautiful smile," and it touched me so deeply that I started a practice of complimenting people.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that's kind of what brought this whole idea of compassion into my life, is that I smile at people. I give people a compliment, particularly people who are working really hard and tend to get misused by others, like servers in a restaurant or grocery store clerks or any kind of a retail worker where people tend to just be very demanding and fast and, expect their needs to be met and don't think for a second about being nice to the person who's serving them. And maybe because my life is a life of service, because I'm in service to my clients all the time. And of course, I'm a mother. I have 3 children who are grown, so I've been in service to my children their whole lives. I think about how lovely it is when someone acknowledges me. Mm-hmm. So I have made a practice of acknowledging other people, and that's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Make a practice of being loving to other people.
And you're irresistible when you're like that. You know, you're open.
Be
sure.
what you want to receive.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
There you go, John. Perfect summary.
And that's what Gandhi said. Be the change you want to see.
Yeah. Yes.
And I really do believe in that. Mm-hmm. So we're using the word love. We're using the word compassion. But it's all about the same thing. Mm-hmm. If you want love in your life, be more loving.
That's right.
If you want more compassion in your life, be more compassionate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Give what you want to receive. I know that you and I have studied a lot with the same spiritual teacher, Michael Beckwith.
Right.
And Reverend Michael says all the time, give before you even think about getting. Mm-hmm. Live to give. Don't live in order to receive, but live to give. And the more I can say from personal experience for sure, the more I am of service and the more I give because it brings me joy, the more joy I experience. But I do want to say that that is different than being codependent. That is different than taking care of others' needs at the expense of my own.
Right.
And I think it's easy for people to get those points confused.
There's a fine line for sure.
So when we're talking about ways that you can bring love into your life, let's have it start with love yourself more. Mm-hmm. Find a reason to compliment yourself about something. Find a way that you can give yourself a smile about something and start and then practice loving other people more, giving love in whatever little ways, whether it's helping a neighbor walk their dog or giving somebody a hug or being nice to somebody you'd rather not be nice to.
Yeah, there you go. That is really deep work.
and forgiving yourself for when you're not, too. I think that love does incorporate a lot of forgiveness, so maybe another way to let more love in is to practice forgiving yourself and forgiving other people more, too.
Absolutely. Forgiveness is important. One of my favorite sayings is when you don't forgive, it's like you're taking the poison and expecting them to die.
Exactly.
Right?
I have used that exact phrase so many times. And
so you have to. That's one of the things I did mention, but certainly forgiving and letting things go.
Yes.
Because don't drag your baggage into now is pretty important.
Absolutely.
So I love that you said that.
I'd love for us to do a whole show just on that, about being able to forgive.
That's a whole show.
It is. That's a whole show. So, John, how are we doing on time? I think
we're time to wrap up.
Time to wrap up. Oh, I hate to end this conversation.
Me too.
So again, to find out more about the beautiful Kathryn Alice, go to KathrynAlice.com. You're welcome to call me at 310-920-9480. That is my professional number. You can look at KathrynTull.com for more information about my practice and my work. We're both on Amazon.com with our books. Right. So glad that you joined us for another episode of Compassionate Conversation. Remember to be more compassionate with yourself and with everybody whose lives you touch this week. Many blessings. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Real life isn't always easy. Real life brings tough questions and difficult decisions. That's why there's Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull.
Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say.
Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, a show about life and the choices we make. Compassionate Conversation with Kathryn Tull on ubnradio.com.